This is part 2 of an interactive approach to literacy instruction. We left off with word study as we are studying the components of balanced literacy. We will move forward to phonics, instruction and curriculums. So phonics is usually taught in whole group and separate literacy blocks, practiced in differentiated groups. Interventions are used to target needs. So Foundations by Wilson Language is a popular and effective school-wide phonics-based curriculum. Orton-Gillingham is a program that offers multi-sensory interventions and intensive instruction for learning difficulties. So we need to remember in the interactive model, there is a lot of top-down theory and philosophies, but there's also those bottom-up learners. So we need to really support those learners as well. We're going to look at word study a moment and look at how we can put theory into practice. This is a balanced literacy diet that includes all of the pieces of reading and language put together. We have spelling and word study highlighted for the purpose of these slides here. And we're looking at a quote here from J. Richard Gentry: "An environment of frequent, purposeful writing provides numerous opportunities for teachers to help students discover more about spelling words." I'm going to extrapolate a few words that will help us with the balanced literacy perception here. So we're looking at lessons that are purposeful. We're looking at opportunities because students have a lot of opportunities during this model to work with each other and to work with the teacher. And I'm looking at discovery. We're looking at ways that students discover learning in the interactive balanced approach. So here's a word study activity, a list and sort example, which you can pull theory from the schema theory, and you can also think about constructivism. The teacher is modeling how to list and sort words into groups, and the students are practicing independently or as partners. Here's a second example, word study with word webs, where the student models words here to teach specific contents, and students use a graphic organizer to transfer that information. So students are working collaboratively. Again, the works of Piaget, Dewey, even the early predecessors of enfoldment theory. Example 3, word study activity assessment. We need to remember that we need to offer authentic assessments, especially during the balanced approach. And this is an example of teachers observing spelling patterns that students are practicing. Here are some more examples of components of balanced literacy that are mixed in during the lessons. Mini lessons, reader and writer's workshop, literacy circles, readers theater, book clubs, author shares, reading logs, and literacy projects. Problem-based learning is a top-down approach, but all students can learn together through peer tutoring. So the use of collaborative teams, students researching and problem solving, students taking on leadership roles, critically thinking, building on those oral language skills and real world connections. Incorporating schema theory. Building schema improves reading skills, so we need to teach students to construct knowledge and help them tell about experiences to make those connections. Weed out any distraction associations. Celebrate that knowledge with each other. So here's an example of an anchor chart used to build on new information. So teachers can either use this for remediation or enrichment. So theories supporting bottom-up learners, because we're looking at the interactive approach. So we have Piaget's theory of cognitive development. We need to remember those maturation levels. Clay's emergent literacy theory. We need to look at the varied performance levels of students. Stage models. We need to look at the individual learning progressions. Theory of literacy and development to help those students build on reading through picture walks, modeled reading, shared reading, small groups, and big books. Family literacy theory. No matter which theory we use, we need to remember that students' needs and family backgrounds always affect students' learning. So theories supporting top-down learners. We have the unfoldment theory, theory of cognitive development, inquiry theory, schema theory, psycholinguistic theory, Goodman's whole language approach, and Rosenblatt's transactional reader response theory. So thinking of all of those theories and everything that we have discussed, we're going to look at a few interactive models here. So here's Fisher and Frey's version of gradual release of responsibility model based off of Person and Gallagher's in 1983. So this is the I do it, we do it, you do it that we are familiar with in the classroom, where the teacher responsibility is focused instruction and guided instruction, and the student responsibility is that collaborative learning and independent learning. And in the middle there is where students are working together, and then eventually they're going to interact with each other, and the transactional process will take place between the teacher and the reader, and students will actually assume responsibility of task. The gradual release model applied to theory is based on many theorists such as Piaget, cognitive structures and schema, Vygotsky, zone of proximal development, Bandura, attention, retention, reproduction, and motivation, all of those components working together. Wood, Bruner, and Ross, scaffolded instruction, which all help to build on foundational and complex skills, as well as target students' needs. Here's another interactive model. We're looking at a model here that is involving Scarborough's reading rope. So we're looking at all of the complexity in reading, and Scarborough actually is a lead researcher of language and development, and she founded that reading complexities actually take a lot of time to learn. It takes a lot of time to learn to read, and there's lots of different intricacies. So this is used for students with dyslexia, but also any students in the classroom. So we're looking at language comprehension and word recognition, where everything is working together and all the strands are necessary. According to Scarborough, we can't just say bottom up and we can't just say top down. We actually have to include all of the different processes working together. So here's another interactive reading model here. And this is Freyer's model. I love Freyer. I love using the Freyer model in my classroom. I feel like I can really, my students really understand and connect to content. So this is when word analysis and vocabulary building takes place, and students are actually using this model. You can use it in all kinds of different ways to define terms and describe attributes and differentiate between examples and non-examples. It helps students to understand words with larger content they're applying and synthesizing and critically thinking. So this is created by Dorothy Freyer. It's a great graphic organizer. When we look at the Freyer model applied to theory, we're looking at the psycholinguistic theory, how language takes place, how reading creates meaning from print. We're looking at cueing systems that help recognize words. I think of Goodman there. Schema theory, Bartlett. Readers are using schemata to make sense of words on a page. Now when we're looking at our students, not just top-down, bottom-up, interactive, and balanced, we're thinking about those struggling learners. What do we do with those struggling learners? They usually have certain characteristics such as difficulty with language skills. They lack reading knowledge and strategies, little motivation. Their parents might struggle with reading. They might be from a socioeconomic background that's a lower income area, and they could have possible learning disabilities. So what can we do? So let's look at the areas of weakness for struggling learners. We're looking at comprehension, higher level thinking skills, vocabulary, listening, formal speaking, informal speaking, written communication, fluency, and phrasing. So how can we really get to the point where the student says, I understand what I read? How powerful is that? Ways to support struggling readers. We can look at context clues to make connections, ask questions, distinguish between relevant and irrelevant data. We can paraphrase, summarize, use descriptive words, reread, recognize when understanding has broke down. That is huge in the classroom for teachers to see that and for students to realize that through that metacognition when we teach that. Offering strategies using graphic organizers to where we don't have that frustration. Or if we do, we have strategies put in place. So when we look at best practices for struggling learners, we're looking at scaffolding and modeling, increasing instruction time, allowing for more opportunities, using semantic maps, listing, grouping, labeling words, using nonfiction text to build on vocabulary, graphic organizers, peer tutoring. So balanced literacy reaches all learners. We're looking at learners that are at risk, have exceptional needs, they're bilingual, multilingual, gifted, learning disabilities. This particular philosophy can help all learners. Systematic explicit phonics is included, whole group, small group, remedial help. We can accelerate learner through advanced lessons, direct instruction, dialogic instruction that improves reading, speaking, and listening, and activities can be teacher and student read. We definitely want a happy learner. Technology programs to enhance skills. I have many listed here. And these are programs that help with core critical thinking skills such as analysis, inferencing, explaining, evaluating, self-regulation, interpretation. Just a few I'll mention: MobyMax, Nearpod, MyOnReader, Google Classroom. We can also look at technology to build on foundational skills which benefit bottom-up learners, such as enhancing print awareness, advancing language and vocabulary, increasing attention and competence. I'll name a few: Starfall, Hooked on Phonics, Tumblebooks. Benefits of technology for any model: promotes complex thinking, curiosity, motivation, personal interest, collaboration, targets specific goals, prepares students for the digital age. Looking at my classroom at a glance to conclude this presentation, I work with an at-risk population where students benefit from bottom-up instruction, but I chose the balanced approach to literacy because my students also excel on top-down methods that have been proven effective for all of my learners. Our school uses Foundations, Fontes and Pinnell, and Lucy Calkins, and Orton Gillingham. We focus on collaborative learning, such as student-centered learning, cooperative grouping, peer tutoring, flexible grouping. Strategies such as modeling, turn and talks, pair and think, pair, share, gradual release, graphic organizers are huge. So all of those things that I mentioned help my diverse learners using top-down and bottom-up methods. So in closing, as I reflect upon theoretical approaches to literacy instruction, I think about how these approaches have increased my knowledge, and I think about essential pedagogical components that are critical to teaching children to read. Further, I've gained a deeper understanding of research outcomes related to these theories so that I can better implement appropriate and effective literacy models. Finally, I believe the interactive reading approach reflects my personal ideologies as well as supports the needs of my diverse learners. This theoretical stance presentation has helped me to thoroughly elucidate my conceptions of literacy philosophies, in addition to my reasoning behind the strategies I use in the classroom to assist my students, as I will now use my discoveries to better serve my children as I put theory into practice. So prior to this class and prior to this presentation, I could take a standard and I could just roll with it. Give me a standard, I know what to teach. And I guess I'm lucky because I have a very good connection with my students and I understand why a balanced approach or why an interactive approach better suits the needs of my learners. But I was never able to put theory maybe into practice, or I was never really able to understand how I put theory into practice, or maybe be able to explain how my students are learning. So now I can better explain in the classroom how my students have excelled. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation.